Part 1, Chapter 3 of 800 Leagues on the Amazon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 800 Leagues on the Amazon by Jules Verne. Part 1, The Giant Raft. Chapter 3, The Garral Family. The village of Iquitos is situated on the left bank of the Amazon, near the 74th meridian, on that portion of the great river which still bears the name of the Maranon, and of which the bed separates Peru from the Republic of Ecuador. It is about 55 leagues to the west of the Brazilian frontier. Iquitos, like every other collection of huts, hamlet, or village met with in the basin of the upper Amazon, was founded by the missionaries. Up to the 17th year of the century, the Iquito Indians, who then formed the entire population, were settled in the interior of the province at some distance from the river. But one day the springs in their territory all dried up under the influence of a volcanic eruption, and they were obliged to come and take up their abode on the left of the Marano. The race soon altered through the alliances which were entered into with the riverine Indians, Chicunas or Omaguas, mixed descent with a few Spaniards, and today Iquitos has a population of 2 or 3 families of half-breeds. The village is most picturesquely grouped on a kind of esplanade, and runs along at about 60 feet from the river. It consists of some 40 miserable huts, whose thatched roofs only just render them worthy of the name of cottages. A stairway made of crossed trunks of trees leads up to the village, which lies hidden from the traveller's eyes until the steps have been ascended. Once at the top, he finds himself before an enclosure admitting of slight defence, and consisting of many different shrubs and arborescent plants, attached to each other by festoons of lianas, which here and there have made their way above the summits of the graceful palms and banana trees. At the time we speak of, the Indians of Iquitos went about in almost a state of nudity. The Spaniards and half-breeds alone were clothed, and much as they scorned their indigenous fellow citizens, wore only a simple shirt, light cotton trousers, and a straw hat. All lived cheerlessly enough in the village, mixing little together, and if they did meet occasionally, it was only at such times as the bell of the mission called them to the dilapidated cottage which served them for a church. But if existence in the village of Iquitos, as in most of the hamlets of the upper Amazon, was almost in a rudimentary stage, it was only necessary to journey a league further down the river to find on the same bank a wealthy settlement, with all the elements of comfortable life. This was the farm of Joam Garral, toward which our 2 young friends returned after their meeting with the captain of the woods. There, on a bend of the stream, at the junction of the river Nanay, which is here about 500 feet across, there had been established for many years this farm, homestead, or, to use the expression of the country, fazenda, then in the height of its prosperity. The Nanay with its left bank bounded it to the north for about a mile, and for nearly the same distance to the east it ran along the bank of the larger river. To the west some small rivulets, tributaries of the Nanay, and some lagoons of small extent, separated it from the savannah and the fields devoted to the pasturage of the cattle. It was here that Joam Garral, in 1826, 26 years before the date when our story opens, was received by the proprietor of the fazenda. This Portuguese, whose name was Magalhaes, followed the trade of timber felling, and his settlement, then recently formed, extended for about half a mile along the bank of the river. There, hospitable as he was, like all the Portuguese of the old race, Magalhaes lived with his daughter Yaquita, who after the death of her mother had taken charge of his household. Magalhaes was an excellent worker, inured to fatigue, but lacking education. If he understood the management of the few slaves whom he owned, and the dozen Indians whom he hired, he showed himself much less apt in the various external requirements of his trade. In truth, the establishment at Iquitos was not prospering, and the affairs of the Portuguese were getting somewhat embarrassed. It was under these circumstances that Joam Garral, then 22 years old, found himself one day in the presence of Magalhaes. He had arrived in the country at the limit both of his strength and his resources. Magalhaës had found him half dead with hunger and fatigue in the neighboring forest. The Portuguese had an excellent heart. He did not ask the unknown where he came from, but what he wanted. The noble, high-spirited look which Joam Garral bore in spite of his exhaustion had touched him. He received him, restored him, and for several days to begin with, offered him a hospitality which lasted for his life. Under such conditions it was that Joam Garral was introduced to the farm at Iquitos. Brazilian by birth, Joam Garral was without family or fortune. Trouble, he said, had obliged him to quit his country and abandon all thoughts of return. He asked his host to excuse his entering on his past misfortunes as serious as they were unmerited. What he sought and what he wished was a new life, a life of labor. He had started on his travels with some slight thought of entering a fazenda in the interior. He was educated, intelligent. He had in all his bearing that inexpressible something which tells you that the man is genuine and of frank and upright character. Magalhaës was quite taken with him, and asked him to remain at the farm, where he would, in a measure, supply that which was wanting in the worthy farmer. Joam Garral accepted the offer without hesitation. His intention had been to join a seringal, or caoutchouc concern, in which in those days a good workman could earn from 5 to 6 piastres a day, and could hope to become a master if he had any luck. But Magalhaës very truly observed that if the pay was good, work was only found in the seringals at harvest time, that is to say, during only a few months of the year, and this would not constitute the permanent position that a young man ought to wish for. The Portuguese was right. Joam Garral saw it, and entered resolutely into the service of the fazenda, deciding to devote to it all his powers. Magalhaës had no cause to regret his generous action. His business recovered. His wood trade, which extended by means of the Amazon up to Pará, was soon considerably extended under the impulse of Joam Garral. The fazenda began to grow in proportion, and to spread out along the bank of the river up to its junction with the Nanay. A delightful residence was made of the house. It was raised a story, surrounded by a veranda, and half hidden under beautiful trees, mimosas, fig sycamores, bauhinias, and paulinias, whose trunks were invisible beneath a network of scarlet-flowered bromelias and passion flowers. At a distance, behind huge bushes and a dense mash of arborescent plants, were concealed the buildings in which the staff of the fazenda were accommodated, the servants' offices, the cabins of the blacks, and the huts of the Indians. From the bank of the river, bordered with reeds and aquatic plants, the tree-encircled house was alone visible. A vast meadow, laboriously cleared along the lagoons, offered excellent pasturage. Cattle abounded, a new source of profit in these fertile countries, where a herd doubles in 4 years, and where 10% interest is earned by nothing more than the skins and the hides of the animals killed for the consumption of those who raise them. A few sitios, or manioc and coffee plantations, were started in parts of the woods which were cleared. Fields of sugar canes soon required the construction of a mill to crush the sacchariferous stalks destined to be used hereafter in the manufacture of molasses, tafia, and rum. In short, 10 years after the arrival of Joam Garral at the farm at Iquitos, the fazenda had become one of the richest establishments on the upper Amazon. Thanks to the good management exercised by the young clerk over the works at home and the business abroad, its prosperity daily increased. The Portuguese did not wait so long to acknowledge what he owed to Joam Garral. In order to recompense him in proportion to his merits, he had from the first given him an interest in the profits of his business, and 4 years after his arrival he had made him a partner on the same footing as himself, and with equal shares. But there was more that he had in store for him. Yaquita, his daughter, had, in this silent young man, so gentle to others, so stern to himself, recognized the sterling qualities which her father had done. She was in love with him, but though on his side Joam had not remained insensible to the merits and the beauty of this excellent girl, he was too proud and reserved to dream of asking her to marry him. A serious incident hastened the solution.